In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was dead, stabbed by senators who believed they were saving the Republic. But the Republic they tried to restore was already failing. Years of civil war, political violence, and constitutional erosion had shattered the old order into this fragile void. Stepped Gaius Octavius, Caesar's 18-year-old adopted son, soon turning 19. This young man would become Rome's first emperor, but not in name. Octavian, later Augustus, understood that overt monarchy was doomed to fail. So, instead, he crafted an illusion, a new Rome built on peace, consensus, and tradition, while quietly placing himself above it all. The death of Caesar had created a vacuum, but it was also exposed how far the Republic had declined. Senators may have held titles, but their authority was hollow. The assemblies were divided, and mobs swayed the streets, amplifying the chaos. Octavian stepped into this chaos not as a warrior, but as a politician in the making, one who would redefine Roman leadership. The streets of Rome had become battlegrounds of ideology. Political gangs, backed by senators and tribunes, fought for control, while assassinations and mob violence undermined any sense of civic order. In this chaos, Octavian's arrival was not seen as a coup, but as a reprieve. Octavian's rise began with Caesar's will. He had been named heir, both politically and financially. Despite his age, Octavian rallied Caesar's veterans and marched towards Rome. Mark Antony, Caesar's former general, scorned him, but the Senate saw opportunity. Cicero supported Octavian to check Antony's growing power. Together, they defeated Antony at Mutina. But Octavian, now holding legions and popular support, pressured the Senate, securing the consulship. He secured the consulship and formed a power-sharing pact with Antony and Lepidus, the second triumvirate. With it came the proscription, state-sanctioned murders and land confiscations, funded their armies, claiming lives like Cicero's. The Republic was bleeding, and Octavian was holding the knife. The formation of the Second Triumvirate was a constitutional earthquake. For 5 years, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus were granted total power. Legislative, judicial, and military, bypassing every Republican safeguard. They used it not for governance, but for revenge. Land was confiscated. Political enemies were slaughtered. Octavian, though publicly claiming restraint, orchestrated many of these moves with chilling calculations. By the time the triumvirate renewed its term, Rome had ceased to function as a republic in anything but name. Octavian's early moves showed both political genius and ruthlessness. He raised private legions, not just with Caesar's name, but with the promises of land and vengeance. To the Senate, he promised loyalty. To the army, reward. To the people, stability. Every message was perfectly tailored. Every move he made was calculated. Antony drifted east and allied with Cleopatra, blending ambition with her political and economic power. Octavian seized the moment. He portrayed Antony as a traitor seduced by the East, loyal to Egypt over Rome. When Octavian publicized Antony's alleged will, whether authentic or embellished, favoring Cleopatra's children, it was a masterstroke. Rome declared war on Cleopatra, not Antony. The final civil war had begun, but the illusion of legitimacy remained. In 31 BC, Octavian's fleet crushed Antony and Cleopatra at Actium. By 30 BC, both were dead. Octavian returned not as a conqueror, but as a savior, and Rome, weary of war, welcomed him. Cleopatra was not merely a lover, she was a queen of legendary ambition. Octavian recognized that she represented everything Rome feared: female power, foreign influence, and dynastic rule. By shifting the target from Antony to Cleopatra, he created a war that felt just, patriotic, and Roman. This was a civil war disguised as a foreign campaign. When Octavian emerged victorious, he did so without appearing to have waged war on a fellow citizen. The drama between Antony and Cleopatra was more than a scandal. It was theater on the world stage. Antony's association with Egypt, with Eastern luxury and monarchical pomp, played into Rome's fears of tyranny and decadence. Octavian exploited this fully, invoking the values of the mos Marium, the customs of the ancestors, to present himself as the moral alternative. In 27 BC, Octavian staged a grand performance. He claimed to relinquish power, restoring the Republic, but the Senate, reliant on his authority, begged him to remain. He accepted with new titles: Augustus and Princeps. He avoided Rex, King, and Dictator. Instead, he presented himself as the first citizen. This was political theater, and it worked. Augustus kept control over the army, the provinces, and the provincial revenues. He offered tradition while quietly building an empire. Augustus' political theater in 27 BC remains one of the most skillful acts in Roman history. By offering to step down, he forced the Senate into a performance of gratitude and dependency. The so-called grand gesture, offering to relinquish power, preserved the facade of republican order: consuls, senators, assemblies. But behind the veil, power had shifted permanently. Augustus retained imperium over Spain, Gaul, and Syria, Rome's richest provinces, and controlled the legions stationed there. With this foundation, he could dominate Roman politics without raising suspicion. Augustus also understood the power of precedent. By returning powers to the Senate, even symbolically, he linked his rule with tradition. He styled himself not as a usurper, but as a restorer. And in a republic where form mattered more than function, this was enough to earn consent. Augustus ruled with subtlety. He accepted powers gradually: tribunician authority, imperium, pontifex maximus. He restored temples, passed moral laws, and patronized poets like Virgil and Horace. He promoted marriage and passed laws promoting marriage and regulating adultery. He wrapped autocracy in morality. Statues, coins, and literature cast him as Rome's father, not its master. He was seen everywhere, yet claimed to hold nothing but duty. He reorganized civic administration, expanding roles for loyal freedmen and equestrians to manage Rome's bureaucracy. He also embedded himself in the cultural fabric of Roman life. Augustus's face appeared on coins, temples bore his name, and holidays marked his victories. He was present in every household, honored at every ceremony. He wasn't a king, he was a symbol. Even his house on the Palatine Hill became a sacred space, symbolizing unity between Rome's mythical past and its imperial present. The visual language of Augustus's reign was just as deliberate. He revived archaic styles in dress and architecture to evoke Rome's storied past. His adopted sons, Gaius and Lucius Caesar, were paraded before the public, linking imperial succession with republican youth and virtue. The Senate still met. Elections still occurred, but the Senate and elections persisted. But real power rested with Augustus. He reformed the military, creating a permanent standing army loyal to him, later shaping imperial policies. He restructured the provinces, ensuring critical territories remained under his control. He expanded administrative roles, laying foundations for a bureaucracy, and began placing trusted figures like Agrippa in civic administration and Tiberius in military command in powerful roles. He was building a monarchy without a crown. As Princeps, Augustus presented himself as the guardian of tradition, but in reality, he was redefining Roman identity. Under his rule, veterans received land grants, provinces were stabilized, and roads and aqueducts expanded Rome's reach. He established the Praetorian Guard, elite soldiers loyal not to the state, but to him. The Senate became a stage, and Augustus its playwright. Debates occurred, but their outcomes were predetermined. This was a republic recast as ritual. In the provinces, Augustus's rule brought new roads, aqueducts, and municipal charters. Cities flourished under his patronage, and loyalty to Augustus replaced loyalty to the distant Senate. He bound the empire not through fear, but through infrastructure and identity. In 2 BC, the Senate named Augustus father of the fatherland. He never took titles like Rex or Dominus, using imperator only as a military honor. Yet he controlled everything an emperor would. When he died in AD 14, he was deified, and his adopted son Tiberius quietly succeeded him. There was, without election, his powers ratified by the Senate. No republican renewal, just a new ruler stepping in. The republic had not fallen. It had faded under the weight of one man's shadow. Augustus's power became so normalized that his succession plan unfolded without chaos. He groomed heirs, first through Marcellus, then Agrippa, and finally Tiberius. He used adoption, a Roman tradition, to elevate Tiberius as his successor. By the time Augustus died, the people and Senate accepted hereditary transition, not as revolution, but as continuity. He had replaced the Republic not with a monarchy, but with an empire wearing the mask of old Rome. Augustus's genius was not just in governance, but in storytelling. He curated his legacy while alive, commissioning monuments, engravings, and histories. The res Gestae, Divi, Augusti, an autobiographical inscription, listed his deeds not as conquests, but as services rendered to the state. Augustus was a master of illusion. He never claimed the crown. He never claimed titles like Rex. He offered peace after generations of war. He cloaked power in tradition. He taught Rome that control didn't require a throne, only patience, appearances, and narrative. In doing so, he gave Rome its first emperor, without ever saying a word. Augustus's legacy is not just political, it is philosophical. He proved that absolute power can be accepted when it arrives gently wrapped in tradition and order. He mastered optics, symbolism, and timing. Where Caesar had frightened the Senate with crowns and parades, Augustus disarmed them with humility and homage to the Republic. He didn't say he was emperor. He let the world say it for him. Future emperors would wear purple, command the legions, and rule from palaces, but none would do so with such subtlety. Augustus showed that the most effective revolution is one that people don't notice. His empire emerged through narrative and need, tempered by calculated violence, but through consensus shaped by narrative and need.